So at this stage in the development, I really focused on adding assets to the scene, making the scene look more full, and making it look more believable and realistic. Through this, I added multiple types of assets to the scene. These assets actually came from the Unreal Engine marketplace. Since I'm specializing in level design, I thought it would be much more appropriate to use assets that were created already and given to me, since that's typically how the pipeline process works. In getting these materials from Unreal Engine specifically, they were free assets, free to use, and I thought they really fit the scene most appropriately. I wanted assets that gave off a certain feel and a certain aesthetic, if you will. In discovering this aesthetic, I really got into the positioning of the assets, what assets I wanted where, messing around with some of the textures of certain assets, using storytelling to my ability, maybe to portray a certain scene that happened. But in adding these assets to the scene, I got to mess around with different setups, different organizations of the assets, trying to use as a variety of assets as I could, without seeming like overly abundant. I want it to be more of a natural feeling, and I wanted things to be pretty both uniform and diverse in the scene. Uniform in the fact that similar assets are being used, and you can see something familiar, but diverse through that the same asset organization types are not being used. They're being used in different circumstances, different instances. Maybe, for instance, for one, a pillar is being set up straight along in the corner of a hallway, and then the next instance, it could be actually in the middle of the hallway, supporting up part of the building. So just like different variations like that help to really build the scene and make it realistic. I basically went through and did all the rooms first. I basically started from the beginning and worked through adding assets to every room, kind of mixing up the asset packs that I chose from, just to give more variety and try to make it look as creepy and worn down as I could. I wanted it to kind of look like an abandoned warehouse construction site type feel. And in this, I was able to actually use some of the assets to cover up flaws. For example, you can see I'm using the pillars here to cover up where maybe some of the textures don't correctly line up. But I was able to actually use these assets to make it look like it was a genuine part of the scene, to where maybe you would never even notice that if that asset wasn't there. So basically, I just moved through the scene, adding assets and different organization patterns to different rooms. When I was done with all the rooms, I ended up going back into the hallways, adding some random assets floating here and there, trying to make it very scattered. Some parts of it scattered, some parts of it very condensed and structured. And in this, you get part of that variety. I really liked the variety aspect, just because in having a variety of assets, you could actually diversify what the player is seeing and allow them not to get bored of the scene. So that's basically what I was trying to accomplish at this part of development. It did take me a long while to actually get this part done, just because it did take a little bit of time. Some assets needed scaling, some assets needed certain rotations to make sure that they weren't looking just copy and pasted, making sure they were looking natural in the scene. And occasionally I would be playing the game just to look at the assets and just to see what the player would see with the lighting and the textures and the rotations and transforms and scales of those certain assets.